Hello, and welcome to this week's workshop. Today we'll be taking a look at inversions, and inversions are considered to be some of the most important poses in yoga, especially for maintaining health and prolonging the aging process. At a most basic level, being upside down helps to tone the fascia. It sends gravity through the body in the opposite direction and helps to balance out the effects of gravity over time. But probably the best use of inversions, or the best benefit of practicing inversions, comes from their effects on the circulatory system and on the nervous system. So in the human body, we have baroreceptors, and these are certain nerves that are designed to measure blood pressure and send that information back to the brain. There's one just above the heart, and then there's one in the back of the neck at the carotid sinus, where the interior and exterior carotid split off. And they are constantly giving feedback on what blood pressure is doing. And when their primary function is to keep blood pressure in the brain fairly stable. The brain's very sensitive to changes in blood pressure. So when the blood pressure increases in the head, the baroreceptors signal the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve calms down the body. It also signals the heart to slow down and to lower blood pressure. On the other hand, when the blood pressure is starting to drop in the brain, the opposite happens. It signals the heart to speed up a little bit, the arteries to contract a little bit, and blood pressure to rise to compensate. Typically, for most people in modern culture, that hardly ever happens. It happens slightly when you go from laying down to sitting up, and when you go from sitting to laying back down, or sitting to standing, standing to sitting. But the effects when we actually turn completely upside down are much more pronounced. There's a second effect, and there's a second way of stimulating the baroreceptor in the carotid, and that is through Jalandhara, the chin lock. So in Jalandhara, if you remember, we did the workshop on the bandhas. Mula bandha is lifting the floor of the pelvis. Uddiyana bandha is firming the abdomen, drawing the transverse in, starting from the pubic bone, zipping up, firming up this area, and floating the chest up as we do that. Jalandhara involves floating the chest, drawing the base, not the head, but the base of the throat back, letting the chin drop slightly and lifting the chest up towards the chin, keeping the back of the neck long. Doctors now will do something where they massage the baroreceptor, the carotid sinus, and they do that specifically to trick that into signaling a decrease in blood pressure. So the heart slows down. So sometimes in emergencies and other situations, a doctor might actually perform a massage there. It's not recommended to anyone that doesn't know what they're doing, that isn't highly trained though. But in yoga, this position has a more subtle but similar effect on slowing down the heart rate, lowering blood pressure. There's a lot of research now showing that over time, practicing inversions on a daily basis can really help manage blood pressure. The problem is, if your blood pressure is not under control, it can actually cause serious issues, turning upside down, reversing blood pressure through the body. So the first thing about inversions is blood pressure definitely needs to be under control. And the second thing is, if you have any type of risk of stroke or heart disease, it's very important that you talk with a doctor and consult a physician, and maybe even show them a picture of the particular inversion you're thinking about doing, so that they can see what you're doing and then either give you a heads up or give you a warning, warn you off doing inversions. There's another effect that's a little bit more systemic. By reversing blood pressure throughout the entire body, and you can see this when you're doing an inversion, your head will become red. When you stand back upright, your feet become red. So what we're doing is using gravity to reverse the pressure of blood throughout the entire system, And one of the things that happens is that the arteries, the muscles in the arteries that contract or relax to help regulate blood pressure throughout the whole body, get exercised. Not only that, they get stretched and released. They get stretched and they contract. So just like in yoga, we stretch and contract the muscles in the skeletal muscles, through inversions, we stretch and release and strengthen the muscles of the circulatory system, the muscles that regulate blood pressure. There's several contraindications. If you have eaten recently, not the best time to turn upside down. You can do a very partial, like legs up the wall, but you don't want to turn the torso upside down if you have eaten recently. If you're on your period, it's questionable. Some people, traditionally, they say no. Modern day yoga teachers that are female, some of them say it's okay, some not. If you aren't sure, best not to do it. If you're pregnant, you probably don't want to be turning upside down unless you have consulted with an expert. And those are the primary: heart disease, high blood pressure. Those are reasons not to do these. If you have neck issues, you want to be particularly careful. So I'm going to show you, I'll demonstrate some of the different types of inversions, some of the ways of modifying them. And for now, just watch and pay attention, and then we'll move into an asana class. And at the end of the asana class, you'll have an opportunity to practice any of the inversions that you decide you'd like to do, from the simplest, safest version, legs up the wall, all the way up to headstand. Okay. So, to start with, the Jalandhara, the chin lock, is combining that with the inversion, gives you your most powerful inversions in terms of the effect on the baroreceptor reflex, that slowing of the heart rate, lowering of blood pressure. Now, that lowering of blood pressure is temporary. When you stand up, it reverses, and the heart speeds up, blood pressure rises because blood's dropping out of the head. What you're really doing, though, is teaching the baroreceptor system. You're waking it up and teaching it and reminding it how it's supposed to work, because it can get very lethargic when we don't use it, when we just go from laying to sitting and laying again. So by turning into a more full inversion and back again, we're really training the baroreceptor reflex to behave more effectively, more efficiently. So we're going to start with the some simple inversions and the safest inversions, and then we'll progress from there. So the default inversion, if you have a headache, if you aren't feeling well, if you don't feel like you have a lot of energy, or you have any contraindication but not doing inversions, the default position is legs up the wall.
This pose can be done without blankets, or 1 or 2 blankets folded up to make a bolster. And if you aren't sure, I'd recommend using 1 or 2 blankets to start with, and then you can adjust for comfort. You'll place the folded blankets against the wall, and then you'll sit sideways with the blankets behind you. And then as you lean away from the wall, place your shoulder on the floor, lift your hips, bring your hips all the way flush with the wall, especially the bottom sit bone. Then from this position, make sure the blankets are snug against your low back, and then roll over sideways. Use your feet to lift the hips up and over. The legs can be straight. Lengthen the back of the neck. Draw the shoulder blades together. Here the hips are slightly higher than the shoulders. If you get bored, you can spread the legs or bend the knees, or if you get uncomfortable. Or you can even stretch out your hip, crossing one leg over the opposite thigh for hip stretch. But the classic pose, legs straight. You can experiment with the amount of support you use, using your legs to lift your hips up and remove a blanket, set them down. And then you could try it without any blankets until you find the most comfortable position. When you're ready to come out, bend the knees, roll to one side, and then pushing up to a comfortable seated position. Next, we'll take a look at a slightly more advanced pose. This is bridge. You'll fold your blankets twice, lengthwise and horizontal, and then stack them with the folded edges together and the fringes on the opposite side. The edge where your head goes is going to hang off the folded edges where it's a nice clean break. So you'll sit close to the fringes, centering yourself left and right on the blankets, lay back. And our starting position is for our neck to be extended out over or beyond the blanket, but your shoulders to be back about 1.5 to 2 inches from the edge of the blanket. That's because as you lift the hips, you'll roll up and forward on the shoulders, and you want the shoulders to end up at the edge of the blanket. Many variations in bridge. One is to grab the ankles, one is to interlace the fingers under the back. A third option is to use your hands to support the pelvis once you're up. So when you're ready, lifting your hips, pushing through your feet, and then trying different positions with your arms until you find one that works well for you. All the contraindications apply. If you're on your period, if you've eaten recently, hiatal hernia, stomach ulcers, pregnant, glaucoma, all reasons not to lift high. You can still do the pose, just don't lift as high. Now you can also do the pose with one blanket or with no blankets. To get the full effect of the Jalahandra lock, of the chin lock, you do it without blankets, but that presupposes that your neck is fairly healthy. This pose, the hips are higher than the heart, and so we're getting a mild inversion here. When you're finished, lower one vertebra at a time, draw the knees into your chest, rock side to side. Next, we'll be practicing and looking at shoulder stand. For shoulder stand, most people will find they do best with 2 blankets, again folded the same way we did for bridge. You'll place the blankets about 8 inches, 10 inches from the wall, so that when you lay down sideways against the wall, you're in the same position you were for bridge, with the shoulders back a couple of inches, the neck clear of the blankets, your feet up the wall. So it's similar to legs up the wall, except for the blanket is further away from the wall now. Now use your legs to lift your hips just a few inches, and then pause. And then depending on how you're feeling, and whether you have any contraindications or not, you can lift up a little further, or you can begin to press up into a full shoulder stand with the feet supporting you on the wall. If you decide you want to play with balance, bring one foot out over your head for balance, and then float the other foot off the wall. And then if you feel stable, straighten both legs and begin to straighten up into a full shoulder stand. The triceps press down into the floor, the neck is long. When you're ready to come down, find the wall with one foot and then both feet, and then use your legs to slow yourself down as you roll back down to the floor. Rolling to one side to come out of this pose. For those of you that want to try plow, you'll turn your blanket around, and this time you'll move it further from the wall, about the length of your leg, or a little bit less. So the blankets would be just in front of the hips if your feet were on the wall. Again, the folded edge this time is close to the wall, the fringes away from the wall. Sitting on the floor by the fringes, leaning back, checking your alignment, again the shoulders back an inch or 1.5 inches from the edge. Roll up and then find the wall with your feet fairly high up the wall, and then with your hands you can support the low back, And then you can walk your feet slowly down the wall until you find a point of comfort. Remember, this pose should be held comfortably and stably. If you prefer, you can interlace your fingers, straighten the arms, and then roll your shoulders towards the floor. When you're ready to come out, grab the hips, bend the knees, and then use your arms to slow yourself down as you roll back to the floor, hugging the knees, rocking side to side. The next inversion we'll look at is a headstand. Sometimes you'll see people folding up blankets for extra padding for a headstand, and that's not a good sign. Usually that means that they aren't carrying enough weight on their arms. You shouldn't need any padding if you're doing the pose correctly. So the first thing to establish is the point of the head that is going to be touching the ground. So find the crown of your head, take 2 fingers, place them in front, and then lift over those 2 fingers and rub the spot just in front of those 2 fingers. That's where you'll be carrying most of your weight as a beginner. Interlace your fingers, tuck the bottom little finger under, then take your wrists wide, your elbows close, and then plant your forearms on the floor, and then settling your head close. Your elbows will try to roll out, so keep pulling the elbows in so you stay on the ulnar bone of the forearm. Place weight on the point on your head you found with your fingertip. And in this pose, most of the weight should be carried on the forearms. So to check that you have the strength, do a few dolphins. Extend back and then touch the floor with your forehead and then extend back so your head is well off the floor as you push back. It's similar to downward facing dog. If you can do that, then you probably have the strength to begin working with a headstand. Lift the knees, place your head on the floor, just forward to the crown. Lift one foot and then float the other leg up. At any point, come back down carefully. Now, for beginners, it is much better to do this with a wall. The wall gives you confidence, but it also protects you from losing your balance and prevents injuries. So do it with a wall maybe 6 or 8 inches from you. Bring one leg up, float the other leg up, find the wall with your feet, and then if you want to balance, straighten one leg, and if you feel stable, straighten both legs. When you're ready to come down, bring one foot to the wall. Notice that you should be able to lift your head off the wall and move your head freely. When you're finished, come down slowly and then take a moment in extended child's pose. Releasing any tension from the back of the neck. Now, for counter pose, there's 2 classically recognized poses. One is Cobra, with an emphasis on the neck. We want to try and lift the chin while keeping the back of the neck long. Now, an alternative that is more popular is sometimes called fish pose. From Dandasana, take your hands behind you, lift the chest, lower the head back. Try to keep the back of your neck long. If that's too easy, you can come down onto your elbows with your elbows under your shoulders. If that's too easy, you can move your elbows closer to your hips. And then lift the chest and lower the head back, opening the throat. So this is a counter, especially important for plow and shoulder stand. When you're finished, draw the knees into your chest, rock side to side. And rolling to one side, coming back up to a seated position.
So those are the classic inversions. Bridge, legs up the walls easiest. Bridge, a little bit more challenging. Shoulder stand and plow have the added advantage not only of the full
So here
inversion,
you can
but
see
of
my
the Jala
hammock.
Handra, the massage
I've
on
hooked
the
it up
carotid
underneath
sinus,
my back deck.
and triggering
You want to make sure
the
that
baroreflex.
it is secure.
And then headstand, which we keep the neck in straight, but it's the fullest of the inversions. And then handstand, which we'll look at another time. With technology, we have alternatives. Probably the one you're most familiar with would be something like a teeter-tot, an inversion bench. You lay down on the bench, and then with a lever you can change the angle of the bench. So you can take your feet a little higher or a lot higher, or be fully inverted, and you're held into the bench securely. One of the benefits of this is that it allows people without any strength or balance or yoga experience to get some of the benefits of the inversion. You lose the massage on the carotid sinus, so you don't get as strong of a baroreflex, but you still do get it from the pressure shift. And one of the downsides is you don't build any strength, you don't improve balance over time. So it's kind of a mixed bag. But for a lot of people, it's a nice alternative. When you're doing inversions, you should not be feeling any unpleasant sensations or pressure in the face, behind the eyes, in the sinuses, in the jaws. So if you are, it means you went up too quick or held too long, and at first your baroreceptor reflex isn't going to kick in quickly. So your body won't control the blood pressure efficiently, effectively, so don't overdo it. Come up a little less, hold a little less, come down a little sooner, and you'll find over time the baroreflex and your ability to control blood pressure, the strength of the muscles that constrict the arteries to control blood flow, all of those things will become stronger, healthier, and more intelligent, and they'll learn how to control blood pressure more effectively, and you'll find you can go up a little further into the inversion, hold a little longer, and come down safely. Now, if you don't want to buy a teeter-tot, which are quite expensive, or any of the other inversion benches, a yoga sling can be very nice, and they take up a lot less room, but you do have to hang them from something, so you have to have a solid beam to hang them from. Some may be designed for doorways, but you want to make sure that however it's suspended, that it is very, very secure. I used just a $5 cloth hammock that I bought from Five Below, and it works just as well as the custom slings. And so I'm going to show you how to use that, how to set it up, and how you can use a hammock and what you can do with it.
They are used around the pelvis so that you aren't putting strain into the knee joint or the ankle joints, and those are both really good advantages. The downside is that you can't control the amount of blood flow as much. So if you aren't used to doing inverted poses, or if you have any back issues, low back issues, any problems, these are not going to be as safe for you to use. I don't recommend them to anyone that hasn't already used them. The first time you use an inversion with a sling, it's a good idea to have a yoga teacher or someone familiar with it to guide you through the steps. As you can see here, I have mine hung underneath my back porch. And again, this is just a $5 hammock that I bought from Five Below. And I position the hammock behind me. And then I snug it into just above the center of the pelvis, a little bit higher, but well below the lumbar vertebra. I lean back. I take my knees wide to the outside of the straps and hook my legs in front. And now I'm completely supported, but I'm hanging from the pelvis so that my knees and my ankles aren't taking the weight. This allows me to lengthen the spine with a full traction, get inversion in terms of blood flow. I'm also free to swing forwards and back, side to side, and to twist. And this can be quite pleasant. And you can also feel different areas of fascia and muscles releasing over time as you play in an inverted position. The contracting and releasing of the muscles helps to release any defense mechanisms to come out. Or you can also open up your shoulders, doing a chest opener behind your back. And now the weight of gravity is assisting in taking the arms down rather than preventing it. When you're ready, you can also bounce your legs and get a groin stretch. You can squeeze the knees in, getting a pelvic adjustment to the pubic bone. When you're ready to come out, you grab the belt and then pull yourself up and lower your feet back to the ground. And then you can also use the hammock in a variety of different ways. Here I'm using it to open up the shoulders and chest by hanging into it. And because my hands are not anchored, I can play with this a lot more. I can introduce a lot more variety into my shoulder stretching routine. When you've been in an inverted pose, especially a big inversion like the sling, you want to spend about an equivalent amount of time vertical to get the full effects. Now, just to show you from the opposite direction, I position the hammock behind me, just above the middle of the sacrum. I lean back. I take my knees wide, and that's what prevents you from dropping out of the hammock. And then again, when you're ready to come up, you grab the belt, pull yourself up and out. Now, some people don't have the strength to get out, which is why I recommend not doing this without someone helping you and assisting you that knows what they're doing the first time. Now, here's 2 photographs of my feet before or during the inversion, immediately afterwards, so you can see the difference in blood flow. Probably the most important concept to make your work with inversions safe, especially if you're new to inversions, and that is designing a safe progression. So for instance, you can see here, to start with, bridge with support for the neck, and then gradually coming up higher and higher over time as you are able to. Inversion should be comfortable for physically, but also for blood pressure. Then gradually, when you reach your full height, you can experiment with using one blanket or no blanket. The goal is not to get rid of the blankets. The goal is to use just the right amount of support for your shoulders to maximize any health benefits for the neck. Then, when you're ready for a stronger inversion, you can begin working with shoulder stand at the wall. At first, just lifting your hips and getting used to that, and then over time, coming up to vertical with your feet balancing on the wall, and then extending one leg, then both legs. Then turning around and using the wall to support you in plow, starting with your feet high up the wall, and then over time working your feet down. And then both shoulder stand and plow can both be practiced with just one blanket or without blankets, depending on how your neck feels about the pose.
So inversions are a regular part of my daily practice, and I highly recommend them to you. Even if it's just the most simple basic, getting your legs elevated above your heart. You could even lay on the couch and bend your knees and put your feet up on the arm of the couch. Anything to begin to change that blood pressure through the body is going to be beneficial to you. Okay? I'd like to thank you for joining me. If you are interested in practicing some inversions, we'll be doing that next. And if you're watching this as a yoga workshop standalone video, you can check out the yoga video number 20, where we'll be actually putting all of this together, our yoga practice, and then finishing with some inverted poses. Thank you for joining me. Namaste.